Your country will shut down because you will have to deal with the cartels. You will have to deal with 63 billion and less income. You will have to deal with a zero out trade, not 171 billion dollars surplus. You will have to deal with 12 million people that are back in your country and they need help from your government, which is corrupt, and you're not going to be able to satisfy them. So I don't think it's very smart for you to start lecturing a foreign nation about what they do or not do to enforce their own laws, what your country deliberately undermined and sought to break. That's a losing argument.
Hello and welcome to the Victor Davis Hanson Show. This is our Saturday edition in which we look at a historical topic in the middle segment. And this week, Victor's going to be addressing the Second Gulf War. So stay with us for the middle segment, but we'll look at a few news stories first. And our southern neighbor's president, Sheinbaum, has given a speech recently, and we'll talk about that first. Stay with us, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the Victor Davis Hanson Show. Victor is the Martin and Neely Anderson Senior Fellow in Military History and Classics at the Hoover Institution and the Wayne and Marcia Buskey Distinguished Fellow in History at Hillsdale College. You can find him at his website, victorhanson.com is the URL. The name of the website is The Blade of Perseus. So please come join us there for what all of Victor's works and his podcasts, his articles, and his books are linked there as well, and you can purchase them. We highly recommend purchasing the Second World War, as it has his views and his new ideas on the Second World War that he's been talking about in some recent podcasts. So please come try it out. So Victor, we have our southern neighbor's president, Sheinbaum, and she's recently given a speech where she wants to criticize the ICE raids and criminalization of illegality and illegal immigration in particular. And she claims that the United States and California in particular would not be what it is without Mexican labor in all sorts of industries and hotel service, not just hotel, but service industries and also industrial industries. And she says, if you're going to look at the fentanyl problem, it is a problem of consumption and not the cartels. And that's her argument.
Yeah, I don't think anybody ever wants to go down that road. And we saw it earlier with that film, A Day Without a Mexican. No group wants to say that we are integral to the United States. And if you take blacks out, Asians out, whites out, you know what I mean? Because then you get into a reply. So she says people from Mexico, nationals, build California are integral. Well, half of all hit and run accidents in LA County, and I think it's true in Fresno County, are from people from Mexico. And I could go on about the gangs and everything. So, and I could say that 50% of all births in California are on Medi-Cal and 40% are on Medi-Cal. And there's a large demographic from people who came from Mexico illegally on that. So I don't think that's wise. Now, when she says fentanyl is a problem of consumption, she's right superficially, but here's why she's wrong. If China did not send the raw product to Mexico, then there wouldn't be fentanyl smuggled into the United States. So why does she allow that to happen? Because the cartels either do one of two things or both. They tell the Mexican government, whether it's Obrador or Sheinbaum, don't mess around with our product. Or they say, just don't think about it because we bring in $20 billion to the Mexican economy. But either way, she's allowing it to happen. And number two, it's not like they send these cartel factories, say, stamp F on every single pill. Here's my green fentanyl pill. Here, take it. They don't do that. They do it as Valium. They do it as Ativan. They do it as methamphetamines. They do it as prescription drugs, illicit. They try to hide it because it is so fatal. And they think that people, if they see an F on a tablet, will think, well, that can kill me, so I won't take it. And the market for the homeless people, 600,000, is not enough for them. In other words, they would kill their own buyer if they identified the product. In other words, there's not enough people who knowingly take fentanyl every day to support the cartels. So what they're doing is they're spreading it around to millions of people who inadvertently take it thinking it is a less toxic drug. So that's second. And then when Mr. Obrador said it was a beautiful thing that 40 million people came here, what is she agrees with that, but what is she basically saying is this: I need to send 1 million or 2 million a year to your country. And they're mostly indigenous people from southern Mexico in Chiapas, Michoacan, Oaxaca, south of Mexico City, along with people who are going through Mexico. And I have to send them there for 3 or 4 reasons. Number one, we don't have jobs, or we don't care to have jobs for them, and we don't supply them with enough social services. So if we don't have your open border, they may march on Mexico City and say you are racist. It's a conquistador legacy of white European, Spaniard, Mexicans who are running the country, and they're not treating people who are indigenous, Nahuatl native speakers originally. So we need your safety valve. That's number one, she's telling us. Number two is we are exporting our people because we see them as valuable serfs. They go across the border. We don't care about them in Mexico. She doesn't give a lecture to people living in Oaxaca and say, I'm very worried about how you're being treated by the Mexican government. It's only when they go across this government boundary between the two states that she cares. And she cares not because she wants to help her own people. She cares because they send $63 billion to Mexico, and they send another 65 to Central America that warps into the Mexican economy. So she's basically saying, be careful, you can't cut off the largest source of foreign exchange. We drain $63 million out of your economy, and we even drain more because your local, state, and federal entitlements, welfare on housing, food, law, education, healthcare, frees up that cash. So a person illegally from Mexico who may be working in landscaping gets free all this stuff. He's one of the people who's 50% of all the residents in California on Medi-Cal. And then he can get $300 or $400 a month to send to his family in Oaxaca. And then that saves us all this money that we don't have to pay for our own people who can't make it, and it adds to the economy. Then there's another subtext.
Can I insert something
Yes.
first before the other subtext? The banks that are Mexican banks that often get these remittances are reporting that these remittances are down by 12%. Just wanted to put in the little Trump victory there.
Yes,
That's
they're
very
12%
good.
because 1 million people have self-deported. And there's another 200,000 who were already through the system and had received their deportation orders, or they were criminals. Another thing, there's an estimation there's 500,000 criminals. So you're trying to tell me, Miss Scheinbaum, you don't know that a lot of your criminals come up here, that when you release these people, rather than have to spend the money to house them, feed them, and watch them, you just let them come across the border where they wreak havoc on us. Number two. Number three, you're very worried because you run up $171 billion surplus on a supposedly free market NAFTA-like origins of our trade. And you do that deliberately, often through letting the Chinese circumvent our tariffs by sending you raw product, which you reassemble in Mexico as your own, i.e., and then you send it up here. So you do not pay that. So for you, it's a Frederick Jackson Turner safety valve to relieve social pressure. Number two, you get rid of a lot of your criminal population. Number three, you get enormous amounts, billions of dollars of remittances. Number five, you don't do anything about the cartel. You blame the person who is a young teenager and he wants to take some Adderall pills. And he goes to a party and someone goes, I got whites. And then they find out that they're not whites. They're fentanyl that's packaged in Mexico to look like methamphetamines. And then you blame people for that. And so we don't accept what you say, and it's going to come to an end. And Mexico needs the United States. Let's just put it this way. If there was a wall, and there is going to be a complete wall, and there are no people coming from Mexico, and there are no people coming from who loses on that? She will say, well, you're having all this cheap labor. Well, I can tell you that the problem we're having right now is AI is taking over everything. And we are going to have a job glut. People graduating and they think they're going to be coders or going to be journalists, and they're not. We're short plumbers, electricians, roofers, and we only have a 62% labor participation rate. And number two, everything is being mechanized. Like I said in an earlier interview, if I look at these almonds, what they're doing today outside the window, the shaking is automatic, the sweeping is automatic, and the pickup of almonds. And one guy is doing the whole thing. One day, one day, one day. It's not Victor and his brothers and cousins out there with mallets and canvases and gunny sacks, to do. It would take us about 3 weeks to do 20 acres, not one man in 3 days to do 40 acres. So we're mechanizing. And so don't give us these lectures that if we don't have Mexican nationals coming illegally into the United States, this country is going to shut down. We have a way to get around that. Your country will shut down because you will have to deal with the cartels. You will have to deal with 63 billion and less income. You will have to deal with a zero out trade, not 171 billion dollars surplus. You will have to deal with 12 million people that are back in your country and they need help from your government, which is corrupt, and you're not going to be able to satisfy them. So I don't think it's very smart for you to start lecturing a foreign nation about what they do or not do to enforce their own laws, what your country deliberately undermined and sought to break. That's a losing argument. And I would redirect you, Ms. Scheinbaum, to the latest Pew poll of last year. They ask people in Mexico and people in the United States, do you have a favored or unfavorable view of the United States? In Mexico, 61% favorable after all the negative publicity. Why? Because it's a big, big money machine. And Americans, do you have a favorable? It's like 65%. No, we do not have a favorable view of Mexico. So every time you interfere in our affairs and then you play victim and say, don't interfere, you can't come across the border and tell the cartel. You are interfering. You just drive down the popularity of Mexico. And believe me, the 12 million people who came across the border, they voted with their feet. And the 20 million that are here and will wave a Mexican flag, they're not going to go back to Mexico because your government is corrupt and you cannot provide basic, safe social services, the rule of law, etc. in that country. Half the country is run by the cartel's money.
Yeah, so
she should not lecture the United States. That's only going to get people angry.
And we can see by her lectures that Donald Trump is being successful because it's...
I wouldn't lecture Donald Trump. I think that is a very stupid thing to do when you have so much vulnerability and he has so much leverage over Mexico. He really does. I mean, and she's trying to tell me that in 2021, when Joe Biden entered office, the United States was just crippled because it didn't have an extra 12 million illegal aliens. 4 years later, it had 12 million illegal aliens. The crime rate had soared in 21 and 22. And our deficits, state, local, and federal, have soared. And she's telling us that 12 million people who came across the southern border is essential to us. I think I like 2020 better than 2025, if you want to ask me, Professor Scheinbaum.
So, Victor, we had a case a while ago where a climatologist, Michael Mann, brought defamation charges against Mark Stein. And the case has gone through the courts, and a recent judge has reduced $1 million defamation fee that Mark Stein was charged to only $5,000 because he found that the climatologist Michael Mann, he's at the University of Pennsylvania, had inconsistencies and misleading information in his case against
It was the so-called hockey stick. That global warming looked like the handle on a hockey stick, and then the edge or the paddle part just soared because of global warming. And Mark Stein and he's a comedian, he's a satirist, and he had made fun of that. And Michael Mann got a lot of left-wing money behind him and thought he was going to make Mark Stein pay as an example so no one would ever criticize or suggest that the climate change advocacy of Michael Mann was flawed. It was a long case. Mark Stein started out that case fairly healthy, and now he's had a whole slew of health problems because the lawsuit threatened to ruin him financially. It tied up all of his time. He was one of the marquee columnists. So it did a lot of damage to Mark Stein, and it was unnecessary. I'm glad that Mark, whom I know and like, I'm glad that he won. But it's sad that it took that long to have it. And the thing about climate change is there's one central truth to it. Europe is destroying its economy through quote unquote renewables. Germany especially. They're getting this very, very expensive kilowatt per hour as a result of shutting down coal, natural gas, oil, not developing nuclear or new hydroelectric. And China is just going full blast. They're going to build in China on the Tibetan border the largest hydroelectric plant in history, bigger than the Three Gorges project. It's going to be able to produce enough hydroelectric for probably 50 million, and it's going to alter the environment. They're going to build a huge tunnel. They're going to do everything. It's on the border with India. The Indians are very upset, but China doesn't care. But what it does do, it keeps lecturing the United States about its sins in Europe. And so the United States and Europe then spend a lot of money and become less productive because of their energy cost, while China feels, well, they're going to cut their emissions and we'll just triple ours and do it cheaply, and then we'll get an edge in trade and production, and maybe the world won't get that hot because the other 1.4 billion people, they will do what's necessary, but we're not. And then they dress that asymmetry with, oh, you had the Industrial Revolution. You did all before we did. Now you're changing the rules when we industrialized. No, when you were not industrialized and you wanted a steam engine or you wanted a shovel, you imported it and somebody had to produce it in their country. So it wasn't just the West that was releasing emissions for itself. It was releasing emissions in the 19th century and early 20th century for the whole world. Got industrial products from the West. And if you thought that emissions were so bad, nobody forced you to buy them or import them. So it's too bad that we're doing this. And it's the project of and in this country, a bi-coastal affluent elite who basically say, I'm in the right zip code. I have the right letters after my name. I'm wealthy. I don't really care what the price of gas is. I do not really care what the price of electricity is. I have my big SUV. I fly private a lot. And I feel terrible about the planet, and all those suckers that are deplorables and irredeemable, they've got to change their lifestyle. Get rid of those Winnebagos, you guys. Get rid of that jet skis. Get a sailboat like ours.
Well, let's turn then last before we go to a break and then to the second Gulf War. The Teamsters have made a switch, and if you ask me, it's a long needed one, of financial support, and they're starting to support Republican candidates as their constituency would like. So I thought that was a great victory for Donald Trump in a way, that the Teamsters now, and a fundamental change culturally that we're seeing, that I feel like you should just add that to all of the disparate problems that the Democratic Party is having, and lack of leadership, et cetera. And now we see some very serious results from that. And I think the Teamsters are
Donald Trump's greatest legacy. He broke the Democratic Party, and he exposed it for what it was. It was a bi-coastal elite party with a bunch of billionaires who spend lavishly and a bunch of subsidized poor, and a professional class that feels frustrated. They make $200,000 and $300,000 a year, but they live in these blue cities that are very expensive and they can't buy their beautiful home. That's what the Mondami constituency is. Frustrated young white professionals. And then they've lost the working class. It's not just they have lost the muscular classes, Hispanic muscular classes, black males, white. As I said before, if you look at 2016, 20, and 24, Donald Trump's white vote, it's pretty constant. And he did not win the popular vote in 2016 or 2020. And his voting, and yet he did win the popular vote and the Electoral College in 2024 with the same percentage and actual numbers of white voters. So what happened? He picked up some women, he picked up some young people, and he got 55% of Hispanic males, and he got about 25% of black males, and he picked up another 10 to 15% of Asian males. And how could that be if he was supposed to be a racist according to the Democrats? It happened because they don't like, it's not that they're just people. They don't want to be talked to. Nobody wants to be talked to. And basically, this is a caricature, but the Democratic attitude toward a black truck driver or a Mexican-American electrician was something like this. Now, you don't know what's good for you, but those 10,000 people crossing the border every day, and the 2 to 3 million people that cross every year illegally in the Rio Grande Valley, they're going to be good for you. I don't care what you say about your schools being swamps, crime going up. They're good for you. Remember that. Now, men have a right to transition, and they are now women, and they're going to compete in your daughter's sports, and you don't know what's good for you because you're too ignorant. But I will represent you. I'm a black woman with a PhD. I'm a Hispanic woman that's your congresswoman. I am your white liberal Chuck Schumer or Nancy Pelosi, and I will tell you what is good for you. Got it? And then they'll say, you know what? You don't understand that gas at $5.50 a gallon is really good for you because the planet is heating up and the new Green Deal is going to save you. Get some solar panels and get on the team. So they talk down sanctimoniously, and that was never clearer when Barack Obama confronted those black Democratic activists, young men, and said, basically, you don't know what you're doing. You think Donald Trump's good or something, you've got to get out there and support Harris. You're suffering basically from Marxist false consciousness. And as an elite, know what's good for you. And I will tell you, now go do it. That's what he basically said to them. For me, the locus classicus, the epitome of this is Pete Buttigieg. Everything about him represents what I just said. Sanctimonious, self-righteous, talk down. I know the answers. I know what's good for you. I am the transportation secretary. I don't think California is suffering from not enough freeways or it's too crowded. It's suffering from racist legacies of clover leaves. And I'm going to make non-racist clover. Nobody wants that. And that's what the Democratic Party, it's a Karen scold.
Well, to add to it, you find out so many things they say are lies. And I think that's even more. I think they might tolerate the Karen scold if this Karen scold wasn't gaslighting them or essentially lying to them. But so.
Well, it is. Jasmine Crockett is like a gift that's a Christmas gift to the Republicans. It was gift wrapped. I mean, here's this preppy woman who went to prep school in Atlanta from upper middle class parents. And then she gets in the House from Texas and she doesn't do anything other than spout off about Donald Trump and white people in this fake inner city patois. And she intersplices the F word, the S-H-I-T word, and she's vulgar. And she screams about all the offenses that she suffered as a proud black woman. And it's just everybody who watches that, black males, Hispanic male, they don't like it. Nobody does. And yet and then there was Elizabeth Warren. I mean, remember when she ran for president? She opened a refrigerator to get a beer in that commercial. Hey, everybody, open refrigerator. It was like she was reading a placard. Elizabeth, open refrigerator slowly. Go in. That thing on the shelf is a beer bottle. Open it. She comes over and goes, bing! I am drinking a beer. I am one of you. I am a non-elite Harvard former law professor who faked a Native American ding. Haha. And then she's back again with Mamdani. So they're sitting on a park bench, and then the script says, laugh and kid around with Mamdani to show you're real. Mamdani! It's so fake. I did an interview today with Senator Eric Schmidt, and he's a really good guy. He's very smart. I really like him. And he made a good point. I was talking about this performance art, with smashing watermelons, Hikem Jeffrey with his Hercules club, Spartacus out there. I am Spartacus. No, I am Spartacus. That kind of stuff, his filibuster. And he said, I said, it's performance art. And he said, yeah, but it's fake performance art. They don't even believe it. It's just fake. It is. It really is.
Just before we go to break, I want to be sure nobody forgets Hillary and the Boilermaker in West Virginia. Just saying. So Elizabeth's not the only one.
Remember the Sojourner Truth? Hi, everybody. I'm so tired. I didn't get off. I didn't come this far just to stop now, everybody. Hillary, the Southern drawl, Boilermaker. They didn't Barack Obama in the primary call her Annie Oakley because she started shooting rifles at the range. That is the most fake candidate we've ever seen. Bill could pull it off because he was actually from a poor family and dysfunctional, and he had those appetites that were dysfunctional. But she tried to act like she was lower middle class.
And she couldn't get rid of her upper middle class.
Snobby, Wesleyan.
Yeah. All right, let's go to a break,
Wellesley,
Victor.
excuse me.
And we'll come back and talk a little bit about the second Gulf War. So stay with us and we'll be back. If you're a homeowner, you need to listen to this. In today's AI and cyber world, scammers are stealing home titles and your equity is the target. Here's how it works. Criminals forge your signature on one document, use a fake notary stamp, pay a small fee with your county, and just like that, your home title has been transferred out of your name. Then they take out loans using your equity or even sell your property, and you won't even know it's happened until you get a collection or foreclosure notice. So when's the last time you checked on your home title? If your answer is never, you need to do something about it right now. That's why I've partnered with Home Title Lock so that you can find out today if you've already been a victim. Go to HometitleLock.com/Victor to get a free title history report and a free trial of their $1 million triple lock protection. That's 24/7 monitoring of your title, urgent alerts to any changes, and if fraud does happen, they'll spend up to $1 million to fix it. Don't be a victim. Protect your equity today. That's HometitleLock.com/Victor. And we'd like to thank Home Title Lock for sponsoring the Victor Davis Hanson Show. Welcome back to the Victor Davis Hanson Show. You can find Victor on X. His handle is @VD and you can find him on Facebook at Hanson's Morning Cup. So if the social media is the place you find news, please add Victor to your following. All right, Victor. So anxious or interested in hearing about the second Gulf War, which went on after 9/11, I believe. So
yes, there were two elements: the 2022 November invasion of Afghanistan, which wasn't really in the Gulf. We'll just call that, and I'll get to that. So when we say second Gulf War, we're talking primarily about Iraq. And so on March 20th of 2003, the United States invaded Saddam Hussein's Iraq. They did so for a variety of reasons. They didn't get UN support to do it as they had for Afghanistan, because the French and everybody were not on board. Now, why did they go in? They went in because they felt that after 9/11, they were going to destroy radical Islam that had caused that, bin Laden, and they believed there were particular governments that were secretly using terrorists. And in the case of Saddam Hussein, they said things that were true and not true, they being the Bush administration. They said that he was sponsoring terrorists that had been involved in the First World Trade. And that was true. The First World Trade attempt to blow it down, I think it was 1993, and they were there. Abu Nidal, a wanted terrorist, was there. And so they said that Saddam Hussein had been involved in terrorism akin to bin Laden. But then they went through, I think they had 21 UN resolutions that authorized the war, and which were passed. And if you read them, only 3 or 4 had anything to do with WMD. They were things like the genocide of the Marsh Arabs, the use of chemical and biological agents after the first Gulf War that Saddam had done, the murdering of his own people, the harboring of international terrorists, the harboring of criminals that attacked the United States. And then I think they made a mistake. They said, and he has WMD. Well, we knew he had WMD at some point because he gassed his own people. But they made such a big deal that that was the only real reason, because it was an existential threat. And they thought that the other legitimate reasons why he might be an enemy, but maybe not justified a preemptive attack, they didn't showcase. So they had an argument that the UN had approved, but they didn't showcase it. So the nerve gas, this was all in the fall of 2000, 2. And that period, when they invaded in March 20th, they didn't find it. Now, we don't know what happened to it. He either got rid of it, or there was these narratives that there were trucks in the night that were taking it to Bashar Assad's Syria. It could have happened. I don't know if it did. But that was a fundamental weakness, that they had said, we're going into Iraq not for prior things he did, but to prevent what he might do if he has his chemical and biological weapons. And then they said he was actively